The thunder of hooves echoed across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory in 1875 as Nora Harlow ran for her life. A small child clutched tightly against her chest. Blood trickled from the cut on her forehead, but she dared not slow down. Behind her, angry shouts from the men of Willow Creek grew louder, their accusations ringing in her ears. She hadn't stolen the child as they claimed she had saved him from a beating that might have killed him. "Stop right there, you thieving witch." Sheriff Tanner bellowed, his voice carrying on the wind. Nora's lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, searching desperately for somewhere to hide in the barren landscape. The 5-year-old boy in her arms whimpered, his small body trembling against hers. "It's all right, Thomas," she whispered, though she knew it was a lie. Nothing was all right. Not since she'd intervened when Jasper Morton had raised his belt to his stepson for accidentally spilling milk. Not since she'd grabbed the child and fled when Jasper had turned his rage on her. As a schoolteacher in Willow Creek for only 3 months, Nora had already recognized the bruises on Thomas that others pretended not to see. The boy's mother had died the previous winter, and Jasper had married a saloon girl who seemed more interested in the bottle than in her new stepson. The sound of horses grew closer. Nora stumbled, her skirts catching on the rough terrain. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide on this open plain. Tears blurred her vision as she realized they would catch her. She clutched Thomas tighter, determined that whatever happened to her, she would not let them hurt this boy again. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, the ground before her suddenly dipped. A small ravine appeared, and within it, the blessed sight of a narrow creek lined with cottonwoods and brush. With renewed strength, Nora half ran, half slid down the embankment, seeking shelter among the trees. "Miss Harlow," Thomas's frightened voice was barely audible. "Hush now," she soothed, ducking beneath the low-hanging branches of a willow. "We must be very quiet." The pounding of hooves grew louder, then stopped. Men's voices carried down to them, angry and determined. "She came this way," Sheriff Tanner shouted. "Fan out and find her. Jasper wants his boy back, and that woman's got to answer for what she's done." Nora's heart hammered in her chest. She knew what awaited her back in town imprisonment at the very least, possibly worse. Jasper Morton was a wealthy cattle baron who practically owned Willow Creek, and she had dared to defy him. The sound of horses splashing through the creek made her press deeper into the shadows. Thomas buried his face against her shoulder, and she stroked his hair, silently praying for deliverance. A twig snapped nearby. Nora froze, holding her breath as a shadow fell across them. A tall figure stood before them, silhouetted against the fading light. A man with a rifle. Instead of shouting to alert the others, he crouched down. "Are you hurt, madam?" His voice was low, concerned rather than accusatory. Nora blinked in surprise. "They'll hang me if they find me," she whispered, tightening her grip on Thomas. "They'll have to get through me first." The stranger's eyes, startlingly blue even in the shadows, met hers with determination. "I'm Isaac Hayes. My ranch is a mile north of here. Can you ride?" Nora nodded, still wary but desperate for any chance of escape. "Good." Isaac glanced over his shoulder. "My horse is just up the bank. I'll create a distraction, then we'll make for my place." Before she could respond, Isaac stood and fired his rifle into the air 3 times. Shouts erupted from further down the creek. "Over here," he yelled. "I've spotted tracks heading west." The sound of horses changing direction followed. Isaac crouched back down. "Come on, now's our chance." Nora hesitated only a moment before following him up the embankment, Thomas still clutched tightly in her arms. A magnificent chestnut stallion waited patiently at the top. "Get on," Isaac instructed, helping her into the saddle before placing Thomas in front of her. He swung up behind them both, his arms encircling Nora as he took the reins. "Hold tight." The horse surged forward, powerful muscles bunching as it carried its triple burden across the plains. Nora felt the warmth of Isaac's chest against her back, the security of his arms around her, and for the first time since she'd grabbed Thomas and run, she allowed herself to hope. They rode for what seemed like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, the landscape changing subtly as they moved north. The barren plains gave way to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. Finally, A small ranch came into view, nestled against the foothills like a sanctuary. As they approached, a dog began to bark, announcing their arrival. An older man emerged from the barn, his weathered face concerned. "Isaac, what's all this?" "Trouble, Hank," Isaac replied as he dismounted. "These folks need shelter." Hank's eyes narrowed as he took in Nora's disheveled appearance and the child in her arms. "Morton's boy," Isaac nodded grimly. "Miss Harlow," Nora supplied. "Nora Harlow. Miss Harlow rescued him from a beating. Now Morton and the sheriff are hunting them down." Hank spat on the ground. "That sounds like Jasper Morton, all right. Meanest son of a," he caught himself, glancing at Thomas. "Meanest man in the territory when he's riled. They can stay in the back room," Isaac decided. "No one will look for them here." "And if they do?" Hank questioned. Isaac's expression hardened. "Then they'll find me waiting." Nora felt a chill at his words. This man she barely knew was willing to face down the law for her. "Mr. Hayes, I can't ask you to risk yourself for us." Isaac helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. "You didn't ask, Miss Harlow." "I offered." Inside the modest ranch house, Hank busied himself heating water while Isaac showed Nora to a small room at the back. "It's not much," he apologized, "but you'll be safe here." The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a small table, and a rocking chair by the window. Thomas, exhausted from their ordeal, had fallen asleep against Nora's shoulder. "It's perfect," she murmured, laying the boy gently on the bed. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Isaac, please." He lingered in the doorway, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "Why did you do it, Miss Harlow?" "You must have known what would happen." Nora looked down at Thomas, his small face peaceful in sleep despite the bruises that marred his arms. "I couldn't stand by and watch anymore," she said simply. No one else was going to help him. Isaac nodded, something like respect flickering in his expression. "Rest now. We'll figure out what to do come morning." After he left, Nora sat in the rocking chair, watching over Thomas as the events of the day caught up with her. She had lost everything: her position, her reputation, possibly even her freedom. And yet, looking at the child sleeping peacefully, she couldn't bring herself to regret her actions. Outside the window, the Wyoming sky deepened to indigo, stars appearing one by one like distant beacons of hope. In the main room, she could hear Isaac and Hank talking in low voices, discussing what to do about her situation. Strange how the kindness of strangers could feel more like home than the town where she'd lived for months. Nora closed her eyes, allowing exhaustion to claim her at last. Whatever tomorrow brought, at least for tonight, they were safe. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee brewing. Nora awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Thomas still slept soundly on the bed where she'd placed him. Sometime during the night, someone had covered them both with quilts. A soft knock at the door preceded Isaac's entrance. He carried a tray with 2 plates of eggs and bacon, along with a cup of coffee for her and a small tin cup of milk for Thomas. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on the small table. "Thank you." Nora smoothed her wrinkled dress, suddenly conscious of her appearance. Her hair had come loose from its pins, and dried blood still stained her forehead. Isaac noticed her discomfort. "There's water heated, and Hank found some clothes that might fit. You belonged to his daughter before she moved to Denver." Nora's throat tightened with gratitude. "You're both very kind." Isaac shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her thanks. "It's what any decent person would do." "No," Nora contradicted softly. "It's not. Decent people in Willow Creek looked the other way when Jasper Morton beat his stepson." A muscle twitched in Isaac's jaw. "I know Morton," he said grimly. "Had dealings with him a few years back. The man's got no right raising a child." Thomas stirred then, his eyes blinking open with the wariness of a child accustomed to fear. When he saw Nora, he relaxed slightly, but his gaze fixed anxiously on Isaac. "It's all right," Nora assured him. "This is Mr. Hayes. He's helping us." Isaac crouched down to the boy's level. "Hello, Thomas. How would you like to see some horses after breakfast?" Thomas's eyes widened with cautious interest. "Real ones." Isaac's laugh was warm and genuine. "Real as they come. Got a new foal just last week." After they'd eaten, Isaac took Thomas to the barn while Nora gratefully accepted the chance to wash and change. The dress Hank provided was simple but clean, a faded blue calico that was only slightly too large. She managed to tame her chestnut hair into a braid, wincing as she cleaned the cut on her forehead. When she emerged, she found Hank sitting at the table, smoking a pipe and reading a newspaper. "The boy's taken to Isaac," he commented. "Not surprising. Isaac's always had a way with creatures that have been hurt." Nora glanced out the window to where Isaac was showing Thomas a small bay foal on spindly legs. The child's face was alight with wonder, his hand tentatively reaching out to touch the velvety muzzle. "How long have you known Mr. Hayes?" she asked, sitting down across from Hank. "Going on 15 years now," the older man replied. "Found him half dead in a snowstorm, brought him here, and he never quite left. Good man, Isaac, best I know." "He seems it," Nora agreed. "But I can't help feeling we've brought trouble to his door." Hank studied her over his spectacles. "Trouble has a way of finding Isaac Hayes whether he looks for it or not. Man's got a sense of justice that won't let him walk away from wrongs." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Hank rose quickly, moving to the window with a speed that belied his age. "Riders coming," he announced grimly. "3 of them." Nora's heart leapt to her throat. "The sheriff," Hank shook his head. "Don't think so." "Don't recognize them?" He reached for a shotgun mounted over the door. "Best get back to your room, Miss Harlow." Outside, Isaac had also heard the approaching riders. He quickly ushered Thomas back toward the house, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. Nora met them at the door, pulling Thomas inside as Isaac remained on the porch, his stance casual but alert as the riders approached through the window. Nora watched as 3 men reined in their horses. They were rough-looking, the kind of men who drifted from town to town taking whatever work they could find or taking whatever they wanted. "Looking for someone, gentlemen?" Isaac's voice carried clearly through the open window. The leader, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. "Heard there might be a woman and child pass through here. Sheriff's offering a reward for information." "Is that so?" Isaac's tone revealed nothing. "Can't say I've seen anyone matching that description." The scarred man's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Mind if we take a look around, just to be sure?" "Actually, I do mind." Isaac didn't move, but something in his posture changed subtly. "This is private property." The tension in the air was palpable. The 3 men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Isaac stood alone on the porch, outnumbered but unwavering. "You willing to risk a lot for folks you don't know?" the scarred man observed, his hand drifting toward his gun. "Who says I don't know them?" Isaac countered. As if on cue, Hank appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand. The odds had shifted, and the 3 riders knew it. After a tense moment, the leader spat on the ground. "Your choice, mister, but when the sheriff comes calling, don't say we didn't warn you." They wheeled their horses around and rode off, dust rising behind them. Isaac watched until they were out of sight before turning back to the house. His eyes met Nora's through the window, and she felt a jolt of something unexpected, not just gratitude, but a deeper connection that unsettled her. "They'll be back," Hank predicted as Isaac rejoined them inside. "And next time they'll bring the sheriff." Isaac nodded grimly. "We need to get you somewhere safer," he told Nora. "I have a friend in Rock Springs who might help, old army buddy who doesn't ask too many questions." "I can't keep running," Nora said, her voice steadier than she felt. "They'll never stop looking for us." "What choice do you have?" Isaac asked gently. "Return to Willow Creek. You know what awaits you there." Thomas, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly spoke up. "I don't want to go back," he whispered, clinging to Nora's skirts. "Please don't make me go back to him." The raw fear in the child's voice strengthened Nora's resolve. "No one's sending you back," she promised, kneeling to his level. "Not ever." Isaac watched them, his expression thoughtful. "There might be another way," he said slowly, "but it would require proof of Morton's abuse enough to convince a judge that the boy shouldn't be returned to him." "How would we get such proof?" Nora asked. "No one in Willow Creek will speak against Jasper Morton." "Not in Willow Creek, maybe," Isaac agreed. "But in Laramie, where the circuit judge presides, that might be different." Hope flared briefly in Nora's heart, only to be quickly extinguished. "It doesn't matter. I have no legal claim to Thomas." I'm just the schoolteacher who kidnapped him in the eyes of the law. Isaac's blue eyes held hers. Then we'll have to change the law's perspective. Over the next few days, a tentative routine emerged at the Hayes Ranch. Nora and Thomas remained hidden inside whenever strangers approached, but otherwise they began to adapt to life on the small homestead. Thomas, especially, seemed to thrive in this new environment. The fearful, withdrawn child gradually gave way to a curious boy who followed Isaac everywhere, asking endless questions about the horses and cattle. Isaac answered each inquiry with patience, teaching Thomas how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, how to brush down the horses, and even letting him help with simple tasks in the barn. Nora found herself watching their interactions with a curious warmth in her chest. Isaac Hayes was not what she had initially expected. Beneath his rugged exterior and quiet demeanor lay a gentle soul and keen intelligence. In the evenings, she discovered he was well-read, with a small but cherished collection of books ranging from Shakespeare to Mark Twain. "How does a cowboy come to appreciate literature?" she asked one night as they sat by the fire, Thomas already asleep in the back room. A smile tugged at Isaac's lips. "Same way as anyone else, I imagine. My mother was determined her sons would be educated even on the frontier." A shadow passed across his face. "She died when I was 14, but by then the love of books was firmly established, and your father killed at Shiloh." Isaac's gaze fixed on the flames. "I was 17, old enough to join up myself, but my younger brother needed me. Came west after the war ended. Your brother," Nora prompted when he fell silent, "died of typhoid 5 years ago." The grief in his voice was old but still present. "Since then, it's just been me and Hank here." Nora's heart ached for his losses. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know something of being alone. My parents died in a fire when I was 20. I've been making my own way since then." Isaac's eyes met hers, recognition of a shared pain passing between them. "Is that what brought you to Willow Creek, making your own way?" Nora nodded. "The school board advertised for a teacher. I had experience from a position in St. Louis and wanted to see more of the country." She gave a rueful smile. "I didn't expect quite so much excitement." Isaac chuckled, the sound warming the room more effectively than the fire. "No one ever does out here." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the flames and Hank's occasional snore from where he dozed in the corner chair. "What will you do?" Isaac asked eventually. "If we can clear your name, I mean." The question caught Nora off guard. She had been so focused on keeping Thomas safe that she hadn't thought beyond their immediate predicament. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't return to teaching in Willow Creek, that's certain. And Thomas," Isaac's voice was carefully neutral. "What of him?" Nora's heart constricted at the thought of separation from the boy who had become so dear to her in such a short time. "If we can prove Jasper unfit, perhaps the court will appoint a guardian. There must be good families who would take him in. And if you could keep him." "Would you want to?" Nora looked up, startled by the directness of the question. "Of course I would. But what court would give a child to an unmarried schoolteacher with no fixed home?" Isaac held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Maybe that's a problem with a solution. Before Nora could ask what he meant, the sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Isaac was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the lamp while Hank jerked awake, reaching for his shotgun. "Get to the back room," Isaac ordered, drawing his pistol. "No matter what happens, stay quiet." Nora hurried to comply, her heart pounding as she slipped into the darkness where Thomas still slept peacefully. Through the thin walls, she could hear male voices, one of which she recognized with a chill Sheriff Tanner. "Evening, Hayes," the sheriff's gravelly voice carried clearly. "Mind if we come in and ask a few questions?" "It's late, Sheriff," Isaac replied evenly. "What's this about?" "I think you know. 3 men reported seeing a woman and child here matching the description of Nora Harlow and Thomas Morton. The woman's wanted for kidnapping." "That's so." "Well, I've been here all week, and I haven't seen anyone matching that description." The sheriff's voice hardened. "I've got a warrant to search the premises, Hayes. Step aside." Nora's blood ran cold. She glanced at Thomas, still mercifully asleep, and made a swift decision. Lifting the boy gently, she moved to the window. It was small but might be large enough for them to slip through. If she could reach the barn, perhaps they could hide in the hayloft until the search was over. As she eased the window open, the voices in the front room grew more heated. "This is private property, Tanner," Isaac was saying. "That warrant had better be in order." "Don't push me, Hayes. I've got 5 deputies with me, and Jasper Morton's offering a hefty reward for the return of his boy." Nora had just managed to get one leg through the window when the door to the back room burst open. She froze, caught in the act of escape, as Sheriff Tanner and 2 deputies stood in the doorway, lanterns illuminating her terrified face. "Well, well," Tanner drawled. "Looks like those men were telling the truth after all." Behind him, Isaac appeared, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Tanner, listen, save it, Hayes." The sheriff nodded to his deputies. "Take the woman into custody and get the boy." "No." Nora clutched Thomas tighter as he awoke, disoriented and frightened. "Please, you can't send him back to Morton. The man beats him." "That's for a judge to decide," Tanner replied coldly. "Right now, you're under arrest for kidnapping." As the deputies approached, Thomas began to scream, clinging desperately to Nora. "Don't let them take me. Please, Miss Harlow." The sound of the child's terror seemed to snap something in Isaac. He moved with lightning speed, placing himself between Nora and the lawman. "Get out of the way, Hayes," Tanner warned, his hand moving to his holster. "I can't do that," Isaac replied, his voice deadly calm. "Not until you hear me out." The tension in the room was unbearable. Nora could see Isaac's shoulders bunched with readiness, could feel Thomas trembling against her. One wrong move and blood would be spilled. 2 minutes, Tanner finally conceded. "Then you step aside or I'll arrest you too for obstruction." Isaac never took his eyes off the sheriff. "The boy's been abused. Jasper Morton's a drunk who beats him regularly. Ask anyone who's seen them together." "Hearsay," Tanner dismissed. "Morton says the boy's clumsy, falls a lot. Without witnesses willing to testify, I'll testify," came a new voice from the doorway. Hank stood there, his weathered face resolute. "I've seen Morton beat that boy with my own eyes last market day in Willow Creek." Tanner hesitated, glancing between Hank and Isaac. "One old man's word against Morton's won't be enough." "Then add mine," Isaac pressed, "and we can find others." "There must be people in town who have seen the same but were too afraid to speak up." "Even if that's true," Tanner argued, "it doesn't change the fact that Miss Harlow took the boy without legal right. She was protecting him." Isaac's voice rose with frustration. "Any decent person would have done the same." Tanner seemed unmoved. "Law's the law, Hayes, now step aside." For a moment it seemed Isaac might refuse, might draw his weapon and damn the consequences. Nora saw his hand twitch, saw the determination in his stance. But then Thomas whimpered again, and the sound seemed to remind Isaac of the child's presence. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back. "This isn't over, Tanner." The sheriff nodded to his deputies, who moved forward to take Nora by the arms. One reached for Thomas, who screamed louder, his small fists batting ineffectually at the man. "Please," Nora begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't separate us, he's terrified." Something like discomfort crossed Tanner's face. "Fine, the boy can ride with you. But you're both coming back to Willow Creek." As they were led outside to the waiting horses, Nora caught Isaac's eye one last time. His expression was a mixture of fury, helplessness, and something else, determination. "I'll come for you," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "You'll never stand alone again. I promise." Then she was lifted onto a horse, Thomas still clutched in her arms, and the group rode away from the safety of the Hayes Ranch into the uncertainty of what awaited them in Willow Creek. The 2-day journey back to Willow Creek was a nightmare of discomfort and anxiety. Nora and Thomas were kept under constant guard, allowed only brief stops for necessary purposes. Thomas cried himself to sleep each night, and Nora wasn't far behind, her fear for both their fates overwhelming. When they finally arrived in town, a crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office, drawn by the news of the schoolteacher's capture. Hostile faces watched as Nora was escorted inside, Thomas still clinging to her like a limpet. "Lock her in the cell," Tanner instructed his deputy. "The boy goes to Morton." "No," Thomas screamed, his little fingers digging into Nora's dress. "Please don't make me go back." Nora held him tighter, facing the sheriff with desperate dignity. Sheriff Tanner, I beg you, at least let the boy stay with me until the judge arrives. He's traumatized. Tanner hesitated, uncomfortable with the situation despite his official stance. Before he could respond, the door burst open and Jasper Morton strode in, his bulky frame filling the small office. "There's my boy," he announced with false joviality. "Come to your pa, Thomas." The child shrank back, terror evident in every line of his small body. The reaction was so visceral, so undeniably genuine that even Tanner couldn't ignore it. "Maybe the boy should stay here for now," the sheriff suggested cautiously. "Just until things settle down." Morton's face darkened. "That's my son. I have rights." "Of course you do," Tanner placated, "but the judge will be here in 3 days. Might be simpler to keep them together until then." Morton looked like he might argue further, but something in Tanner's expression made him reconsider. 3 days, he agreed grudgingly. "Then I want both the boy and that woman who stole him brought before the judge." After Morton left, Tanner escorted Nora and Thomas to the cell at the back of the office. It was small, with a single cot and a chamber pot in the corner, but at least they were together. "Thank you," Nora said quietly as the sheriff locked the door. Tanner didn't meet her eyes. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Harlow." Kidnapping's a serious charge, and Morton's got influence with Judge Harmon. After he left, Nora sat on the cot with Thomas, trying to comfort him with stories and quiet songs. As night fell, the boy finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, leaving Nora alone with her thoughts. 3 days. In 3 days, she would face a judge who would likely send her to prison and Thomas back to his abusive stepfather. Unless Isaac found a way to help them, as he'd promised. But what could one rancher do against the law and Jasper Morton's influence? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Lily Cooper, the wife of the town's doctor, appeared with a basket containing fresh bread, cheese, and apples. "Mrs. Cooper," Nora said in surprise, "I didn't expect to see you." Lily glanced nervously over her shoulder before passing the basket through the bars. "I couldn't stay away, not after everything Thomas told me during his checkups." Nora's heart leapt. "You knew about the abuse?" Lily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Dr. Cooper, he treated Thomas 3 times for accidents, broken arm, bruised ribs, burns on his hands. "We suspected, but Jasper Morton is not a man to cross lightly. But you're here now," Nora pointed out, "because you had the courage to do what we should have done months ago." Lily looked down at Thomas, who was still sleeping. "Robert is gathering evidence records of Thomas's injuries, statements from people who witnessed Morton's treatment of the boy." Hope blossomed in Nora's chest. "Do you think it will be enough?" "I don't know," Lily admitted, "but you won't be alone when you face the judge, that I can promise." After Lily left, more visitors came: the baker, whose daughter Nora had helped learn to read, the blacksmith's wife, who remembered Thomas hiding in her store when Morton was in one of his rages. Small gestures of support in a town Nora had thought indifferent to the boy's suffering. On the second day, a commotion outside the sheriff's office drew Nora to the barred window. She could see a group of riders approaching, and at their head, the unmistakable figure of Isaac Hayes. Her heart raced as she watched him dismount and stride into the building. Voices rose in the outer office, Isaac's deep tones countered by Tanner's gruff responses. Then the door to the cell area opened, and Isaac appeared, accompanied by a reluctant-looking sheriff. 5 minutes, Tanner conceded, unlocking the cell door. "That's all." As soon as the door opened, Thomas launched himself at Isaac with a cry of joy. The cowboy caught him easily, lifting him high before setting him back down with a gentle ruffle of his hair. "You doing all right, partner?" Isaac asked, crouching to the boy's level. Thomas nodded solemnly. "Miss Harlow takes care of me, but they want to send me back to him." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Isaac promised before straightening to face Nora. The look that passed between them was charged with unspoken feelings. Nora found herself moving toward him without conscious thought, stopping just short of an embrace that would have been improper before the watching sheriff. "You came," she said softly. "I promised I would." Isaac's blue eyes held hers. "And I've been busy. Rode to Laramie, spoke with Judge Harmon myself, brought back a few people who might make a difference tomorrow." "What people?" A smile tugged at Isaac's lips. "Jasper Morton's been leaving a trail of misery longer than he knows." Former employees, neighbors, even his last wife's sister, all with stories to tell. Nora's eyes widened. His last wife, Thomas's mother, Isaac nodded grimly. Turns out her illness might not have been natural, nothing that can be proved after all this time, but enough to raise questions. Hope warred with caution in Nora's heart. Will it be enough? It has to be. Isaac's voice dropped lower for her ears alone. I won't let you face this alone, Nora. Not now, not ever. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. In the short time they'd known each other, something profound had grown between them, a connection forged in crisis but rooted in mutual respect and growing affection. Time's up, Tanner announced from the doorway. Isaac stepped back reluctantly. I'll see you at the hearing tomorrow, both of you. He touched Thomas's shoulder reassuringly. Stay strong, partner. After he left, Thomas looked up at Nora with the first real hope she'd seen in his eyes since their capture. Is Mr. Hayes going to save us? Nora gathered the boy close, her own hope rising despite her attempts to temper it. He's certainly going to try, Thomas, and he's not a man who gives up easily. The next morning, Nora dressed Thomas and herself as neatly as possible with the clean clothes Lily Cooper had brought. The hearing was to be held in the town hall, the largest building in Willow Creek that could accommodate the crowd that had gathered. Sheriff Tanner escorted them from the jail, his expression unreadable. As they approached the hall, Nora could see that the building was packed to capacity, with more townspeople gathered outside, straining to hear through open windows. Inside, Judge Harmon sat at a table on a raised platform, his stern countenance revealing nothing of his thoughts. Jasper Morton and his lawyer sat to one side, while Isaac stood on the other with Hank and several strangers Nora didn't recognize. All rise, the bailiff called as Nora and Thomas were led to a chair near Isaac. Judge Harmon, a thin man with piercing eyes and iron gray hair, surveyed the room. This is an unusual proceeding, he began. We have allegations of kidnapping against Miss Nora Harlow and counter-allegations of child abuse against Mr. Jasper Morton. I intend to hear both sides fully before rendering judgment. Morton's lawyer spoke first, painting Nora as a delusional spinster who had become unhealthily attached to her student and fabricated abuse allegations to justify her criminal actions. Mr. Morton is a respected businessman and landowner, the lawyer concluded. His only desire is to have his stepson returned to his custody and to see justice done for this unconscionable kidnapping. When it was Isaac's turn to present their case, Nora held her breath. He stood tall and confident, addressing the judge with respect but unwavering conviction. Your Honor, I've brought witnesses today who can testify to Jasper Morton's true character and his treatment of Thomas. These are not rumors or hearsay, but first-hand accounts from reputable citizens. One by one, Isaac's witnesses came forward. A former ranch hand described Morton's violent rages when drunk. A neighboring farmer recalled seeing Morton strike Thomas so hard the boy fell unconscious. Most damning of all was the testimony of Sarah Winters, the sister of Thomas's deceased mother. My sister wrote to me in the weeks before her death, Sarah testified, her voice shaking with emotion. She feared for her life and for her sons. She claimed Jasper had threatened to kill them both if she ever tried to leave him. Morton surged to his feet. Lies, all lies. Sit down, Mr. Morton, Judge Harmon ordered sharply. You'll have your chance to respond. Dr. Cooper presented his medical records, pointing out the pattern of injuries consistent with abuse rather than childhood accidents. Lily Cooper and other townspeople testified to Thomas's fear of his stepfather. Throughout it all, Thomas sat close to Nora, occasionally hiding his face against her side when the testimony became particularly disturbing. Isaac remained nearby, his solid presence a comfort to them both. When Morton finally took the stand, his earlier confidence had faltered. Under the judge's probing questions, he grew defensive, then belligerent, revealing a temper that lent credence to the witnesses' accounts. The boy needs discipline, Morton insisted. That's all. These people are conspiring against me because they want my land. Is that your testimony, Mr. Morton? Judge Harmon asked coolly. That dozens of unrelated witnesses have fabricated consistent accounts of abuse as part of a land-grabbing conspiracy. Morton faltered, his face flushing with anger. The boy is mine by law. That woman had no right to take him. No right, Isaac interrupted, stepping forward, except the moral obligation any decent human being has to protect a child from harm. The room fell silent. Judge Harmon studied Isaac thoughtfully before turning to Nora. Miss Harlow, would you care to make a statement before I render my decision? Nora rose, her legs trembling but her voice steady. Your Honor, I acknowledge that I took Thomas without legal authority. If that constitutes kidnapping, then I am guilty, but I would not leave him to suffer further abuse when no one else was willing to intervene. She looked directly at the judge. I would make the same choice again, knowing the consequences, if it meant saving this child from harm. Judge Harmon nodded slowly, then took several minutes to review his notes while the room waited in tense silence. Finally, he looked up. Having heard all testimony and examined the evidence, I find that Thomas Morton has indeed suffered abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Jasper Morton. I hereby terminate Mr. Morton's parental rights and remove the boy from his custody permanently. A murmur ran through the crowd. Morton jumped to his feet, face contorted with rage. You can't do that. He's my property. Children are not property, Mr. Morton, the judge replied coldly. And one more outburst will see you held in contempt. Morton subsided, glaring venomously at Nora and Isaac. As for the charges against Miss Harlow, the judge continued, while I cannot condone taking the law into one's own hands, I recognize that she acted out of genuine concern for the child's welfare. Therefore, I am dismissing the kidnapping charges with the admonition that in the future she pursue legal channels for addressing such concerns. Relief washed over Nora so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Isaac's hand found hers, squeezing it supportively. That leaves the matter of Thomas's guardianship, Judge Harmon noted. As he has no blood relatives willing or able to take custody if it please the court, Isaac interrupted, stepping forward. I would like to petition for guardianship of Thomas. Nora turned to him in surprise. They hadn't discussed this. The judge raised an eyebrow. On what grounds, Mr. Hayes? On the grounds that I can provide him a stable home, adequate support, and the guidance of a man who would never raise a hand to him in anger, Isaac replied firmly. And he added, glancing at Nora, with the hope that Miss Harlow might consent to assist me in this endeavor. Judge Harmon studied them both. Miss Harlow, what say you to this proposal? Nora looked at Isaac, seeing in his eyes not just determination to protect Thomas, but something deeper, an invitation, a promise, a future she hadn't dared to imagine. I would be honored to help raise Thomas, she said softly, but I'm not sure the court would find such an arrangement. Appropriate? A small smile crossed the judge's face. Indeed, which is why I would suggest that if you two intend to raise this child together, you should consider formalizing your relationship in a manner recognized by law. Isaac's eyes never left Nora's face. I believe that could be arranged, Your Honor, if Miss Harlow is willing. The courtroom faded around them as Nora absorbed the implication of his words. Was this a proposal born of necessity or something more? The answer was in Isaac's eyes, the tenderness, the respect, the affection that had grown between them in such a short time. I am willing, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Judge Harmon nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Then I will grant temporary joint guardianship to Mr. Hayes and Miss Harlow, with the understanding that they will wed within 1 month, at which time permanent guardianship will be assigned to them both. As the judge gavelled the hearing closed, Thomas looked up at them both, hope dawning on his small face. Does this mean I get to stay with you, both of you? Isaac crouched down, meeting the boy's eyes. That's exactly what it means, partner, if that's what you want. Thomas threw his arms around Isaac's neck, then reached for Nora to include her in the embrace. For the first time since she'd known him, the boy smiled without reservation, without fear shadowing his eyes. Outside the town hall, as well-wishers surrounded them with congratulations, Isaac drew Nora slightly apart from the crowd. I hope you don't feel pressured by what happened in there, he said quietly. If marriage isn't what you want, we can find another way to protect Thomas. Nora studied his face, finding sincerity in every line. Is it what you want, Isaac? His expression softened. I've been alone a long time, Nora. Never thought I'd find someone who made me want to change that. Then you came running across my land with a child in your arms and courage in your heart, and suddenly my world shifted. He took her hands in his. I know it's fast, but I'm certain of my feelings. I want you in my life, you and Thomas, not just for his sake, but for mine, for ours. Nora felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same way, she admitted. It defies all logic, but in these few days I've come to care for you deeply. Isaac's smile was radiant. Then logic be damned. We'll build something beautiful together, the three of us. 1 month later, Nora stood in the small church of Willow Creek, wearing a simple white dress that Lily Cooper had helped her make. Thomas, scrubbed clean and beaming with pride, stood beside her, holding a small pillow with 2 gold bands. The church was packed with townspeople, many of whom had testified on their behalf at the hearing. In the month since the trial, opinions in Willow Creek had shifted dramatically. Jasper Morton had left town, unable to face the community that had finally seen him for what he was. Those who had looked the other way for too long seemed determined to make amends by embracing Nora, Isaac, and Thomas as a family. As Isaac appeared at the altar, handsome in a new suit, his blue eyes fixed on her with such tenderness, Nora knew she was making the right choice. Their courtship had been unconventional, compressed into intense weeks of shared purpose and deepening affection, but the foundation was solid, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love that grew stronger each day. You look beautiful, Isaac whispered as she reached his side. You look rather handsome yourself, Mr. Hayes, she replied, her heart full to bursting. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. When they exchanged vows, Isaac added a special promise directly to Thomas. I vow to be a father who listens before he speaks, who guides without crushing, who protects without controlling, and who loves without condition. You will always have a home with us, Thomas, and you will never know fear in that home. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as Thomas hugged them both, his small face alight with joy and security that had been so long denied him. The reception was held at the Hayes Ranch, which had been transformed for the occasion with flowers, bunting, and tables laden with food contributed by the townspeople. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Nora watched Thomas playing with other children from town, his laughter carrying on the evening air. The change in him over the past month had been remarkable, nightmares giving way to peaceful sleep, wariness replaced by growing confidence. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Hayes, Isaac said, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of punch. The name still sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Hayes, she repeated, savoring the words. I was just thinking how much has changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, I was alone, teaching children who weren't mine in a town where I had no real connections. And now, Isaac prompted, his arms slipping around her waist. Nora leaned into his embrace. Now I have a husband I adore, a son who fills my heart with joy, and a home that truly feels like home. Isaac's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. This is just the beginning, he murmured against her lips. We have a lifetime ahead of us. A lifetime, Nora agreed, resting her head against his shoulder as they watched Thomas in the fading light. That sounds perfect. 3 years later, the Hayes Ranch had flourished under Isaac and Nora's care. They had expanded the house, adding rooms for their growing family. Thomas, now 8, and his 1-year-old sister, Emma, born after a difficult but ultimately joyful pregnancy. The autumn morning was crisp as Nora stood on the porch, watching Isaac and Thomas riding together in the corral. Thomas had grown tall and strong, his earlier trauma evident only in occasional nightmares and a fierce protectiveness toward his baby sister. Under Isaac's patient guidance, he had become an excellent rider and was learning the business of ranching with enthusiasm. Emma squirmed in Nora's arms, reaching toward her father and brother with chubby hands. Pa, Pa, she called, her favorite word. Isaac looked up, his face breaking into the smile that still made Nora's heart skip a beat. He dismounted and lifted Thomas down before jogging over to the porch. There's my girls, he said, planting a kiss on Emma's head before drawing Nora into a one-armed embrace. Everything all right, perfect, Nora replied. Just watching my favorite men. Thomas puffed up with pride at being called a man. At 8, he walked the line between childhood and the young man he was becoming, eager for responsibility yet still needing the security of his parents' love. "Pa's teaching me how to train the new colt," he announced, reaching up to take Emma from Nora's arms. The baby went willingly, adoring her big brother. "When she's bigger, I'll teach Emma too." "I'm sure you will," Nora agreed, watching the gentle way Thomas held his sister. He had healed in ways she had once feared might be impossible, becoming a confident, kind-hearted boy with a special compassion for those who were vulnerable. That afternoon, as the family sat down to dinner, a knock at the door interrupted their meal. Isaac answered it to find Sheriff Tanner standing on the porch, hat in hand. "Evening, Hayes family," he greeted them, nodding to Nora and the children. "Sorry to intrude on your supper, but I thought you'd want to know right away." "Know what?" Isaac asked, inviting the sheriff inside. "Jasper Morton's dead," Tanner announced bluntly. "Shot in a gambling dispute over in Cheyenne. Thought the boy might want to know he's truly free now." Thomas, who had tensed at the mention of his stepfather's name, let out a long breath. "He can't hurt anyone anymore," he said quietly. Nora moved to his side, her hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" Thomas considered the question seriously. "Yes," he decided finally. "I'm sad that he died that way, but I'm not sad that he's gone." His maturity in that moment brought tears to Nora's eyes. "That's a very grown-up way to feel," she told him. "It's all right to have complicated feelings about it." After the sheriff left, the family resumed their meal, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. That night, after the children were asleep, Nora found Isaac on the porch, staring up at the stars. "Thomas took the news better than I expected," she said, joining him on the bench. Isaac nodded. "He's a remarkable boy. After everything he's been through, he still has compassion." "That's a rare quality." "He learned it from you," Nora said softly. Isaac turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "From us both. You're the one who risked everything to save him, remember, running across the prairie with a child who wasn't yours because it was the right thing to do." Nora leaned against him, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I was so frightened that day, not just of being caught, but of failing him. Instead, you saved him, and in a way, you saved me too." Isaac's voice was thoughtful. "I was content enough before, but I didn't realize how lonely I was until you and Thomas came into my life. It's strange how the worst day of my life led to all this happiness," Nora mused. "If I hadn't seen Morton raising his belt to Thomas, if I hadn't acted on impulse, if you hadn't run across my land," Isaac continued, "if I hadn't been riding fence that day, we might never have met," Nora finished. "And now I can't imagine my life without you." Isaac drew her closer. "You'll never have to. Remember what I promised you that day in the jail. You'll never stand alone again." "And you've kept that promise every day since," Nora whispered, tilting her face up for his kiss. Above them, the Wyoming sky stretched endlessly, stars scattered like promises across the velvet darkness. On the ranch that had become their sanctuary, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved without condition or reservation. For Nora and Isaac Hayes, the journey had been unexpected, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But in finding each other, in choosing to stand together against injustice, they had created something precious and enduring. A family bound not by blood, but by love, courage, and the unwavering commitment to protect what mattered most. And in the years that followed, as Thomas grew to manhood and Emma blossomed into a spirited young woman, as the ranch prospered, and the Hayes family became known throughout the territory for their generosity and integrity, Nora often remembered that desperate flight across the prairie and the blue-eyed cowboy who had kept his promise to stand beside her, always.